Hey everyone, this is Mike and welcome to my walkthrough for the third Circle Savage. Let's just jump right into it. First attack is going to be a raid-wide AoE called Scorched Exaltation, so just like always, just put up some mitigation for this one and then you should be fine. Following this, we have a double tank buster. This is called Heat of Condemnation and it will tether two random players, so both of your tanks will need to pick up these tethers, use some cooldowns. And then of course try to not overlap these because they are fairly big AoEs and they do give fire resistance down, so if you overlap these then you're going to be dying as well. Following that we have Experimental Fire Plume. This has two different variations. Either you have the small orbs as we have right here, or you have one gigantic orb. If it is small orbs we get a Shiva pattern as we like to call it, which is where we have explosions on the outside of the arena and then one final one on the inside. If it is one big orb, it is baited on your players and then it's just going to be one gigantic explosion, which you'll see later into the fight as well. So because it's small orbs we have Shiva, so we have the explosions on the outside of the arena that hit 4 times and then one final explosion in the middle. Following that we have right or left Cinderwing, exactly the same as normal mode. If it is right, move to the left of the boss. If it is left, move to the right of the boss. And then we're going to be pulling the boss back to the middle for our next mechanic. Darkened Fire is going to be spawning plumes on 4 players, either all DPS or all tanks and healers, I believe it is going to be. So we just split up into 4 groups of 2, 1 tank and healers with one of the DPS players. We're also going to be using the squares that you can see on the map right here. There are 4 squares that you can use for this. These are the intercardinals of the map. Then we have our Darkened Fires. Just like normal mode, we need to hit them with AoEs, and everybody is going to be targeted with one of these AoEs. So we just use our markers 1 through 4 for this, 1, 2, 3 and 4, and then we go 5, 6, 7 and 8. That will hit all of our Darkened Fires because we need to remove the debuffs that's on them. If you can't remove all the debuffs, they are invulnerable, and then of course you can't kill them before they cast their Enrage cast. So everybody is getting the cleanses off and then we can start killing these Darkened Fires. If you don't kill them in time, you can survive 1 explosion, but 2 explosions will just wipe the raid. Then another tank buster, Heat of Condemnation, should just like before, pick up your tethers, use some cooldowns, make sure that you're away from each other. Another Scorched Exaltation, so raid-wide AoE. Put up some mitigation for this one. And then we see a next new mechanic. This one is also again very similar to normal mode. Devouring Brand is going to be putting those line AoEs through the map. Together with this is an Experimental Fire Plume, so again Shiva or the baited one. It's Shiva again. So we just move into where the first AoE is. You need to be in one of the corners. Now as soon as these fire AoEs touch the middle, they're also going to expand, so don't stand too close to them. It coincides with the cast bar that the boss is doing, which is Searing Breeze. This is going to put AoEs underneath all of your players. As you can see, the line AoEs expanded, and then everybody also gets their AoEs underneath them, so just move away from them to dodge this. Another left or right Cinderwing, so again dodge this accordingly as well. Another set of tank busters, so pick up your tethers, use some cooldowns. And then we have one final mechanic before we move into the ad phase, another Experimental Fire Plume. Again, Shiva or the big orb. This time is going to be the big orb. So as you can see, we're all stacked in the middle, and then we move to the edge of the arena to dodge this baited big AoE. Then, this is going to have 2 different iterations. Either you have 2 of the outside beaks that are on fire, or it's going to be the middle one. Now we had the 2 outside ones for our first one. Later on into the fight you'll see this come back again, and then we have the other pattern, so you'll be able to see what both patterns look like. For the first one, this is going to be dropping AoEs on all tanks and healers, or on all of the DPS players. So again, we're going to be pairing up 1 tank and healer with 1 DPS, and then we are spread in a line. And I'll turn my camera as well, so you can see what this looks like. And then of course, everybody needs to be lined up in the middle of the arena to dodge the outside AoEs. And then you'll see what the other pattern looks like towards the end of the fight as well. Then for the ad phase, this is going to be spawning 4 Sunbirds. We want to be DPSing these down away from each other, because when they respawn, because they're a phoenix, they're going to be doing those big AoEs that you also see on normal mode. And if they hit each other, they get a damage up. And if they have a damage up, they're going to be killing people when they respawn as well. So that's why we put them on the edges of the arena. The reason why we also want to put them as much to the edge as possible is because of the mechanic that's gonna happen now. So all of these Sunbirds will tether to one player. That player will also tether to the 4 other players that did not get a bird, and you need to run away from your ad and also run away from the other player. The way I personally found this easiest to do is just stand on the other side of the arena of where you're tethered to, and you'll see what I do with that in just a second. So I am tethered to my red mage, who is in the middle over here. So to make it simple, he should have just gone to my ad, and I go to the ad that he is tethered to. So you'll see me jump to the other side of the arena. But as long as your tether turns purple, it doesn't really matter where you stand. But in my opinion, if you just go to the exact opposite of the arena, it just makes it easier. Because then if you're a melee player, you can also just keep hitting these birds. And they do have an enrage, so it's important that you deal as much damage as possible to these whenever possible. So first, the birds are going to jump to the person that they are tethered to right here. And then they're going to jump again to the person that was tethered to said person with their second jump. Also, whenever you're the person that gets the bird first, so I'm going to rewind real quick because you can see my samurai do it over here, you'll also want to move a little bit. So as you can see, my samurai gets hit, and now he's going to move out of the way of the bird so that he doesn't get hit by the second dash. Because, for example, in my position over here, if I was to stand here when the bird was to dash a second time, I would get hit again. And because I get blunt resistance down, I would not be able to survive that second hit. So if you're the one that's tethered to a player and a bird, make sure that you move a bit for the second dash. After this, we're just pulling them together so that we can AoE them a little bit. Make sure that your tanks have aggro on all 4. And then we're going to do the same as we did with the small birds. Pull them to the edges and then just kill them, making sure that they do not overlap each other. Because otherwise they'll give a damage up to the boss. And if the boss has a damage up, the raid wight is just going to kill you. It is possible to drop one of the birds in the middle of the arena. It doesn't matter if they touch the boss, it matters that they do not touch each other. Also heal up real quick after this, because the birds will deal a raid wight AoE. Right here, Flames of Undeath, so make sure that everybody is healed up for that. And then we get our Phoenix Reborn, or whatever this thing is called, Death Rebirth. Gonna be another raid wight AoE. And after this, our second player in aggro is also going to be receiving auto attack, so you want to make sure that your co-tank is the second person in aggro so that they receive the auto attacks. Because now we have those 4 plumes circling around the Phoenix, and that is going to be exactly that. Another Heat of Condemnation, so again, pick up your tethers, use some cooldowns. This Tank Buster comes back a lot, so you should be familiar with this mechanic by now. Then we have Fledgling Flight. This is going to target either all tanks and healers or all of the DPS with these plumes. For now, all we need to do with these is just point them to the outside of the arena. They also can't be too close to each other because then they'll tether and I believe they explode, so just keep them away from each other. We just did, again, as before, 1, 2, 3, 4 markers, place them on the little circle that you can see on the arena, and then they are far enough away from each other. And they will do a conal AoE in the direction that they were facing. So for the first mechanic, don't really have to pay too much attention to that, but they'll come back in a later mechanic, and then it's very important that they are positioned correctly. Then Experimental Glory Plume is going to be very similar to what we had in the beginning of the fight, but there is a second mechanic added to it. So again, small ball's Shiva, big ball is the baited one. This one was always Shiva, so I believe it is pretty much fixed that this one will always be Shiva. But then the second mechanic, the black/red orb, is going to be either one big orb, and that means group stacks, or small orbs, which means everybody needs to be away from each other. You'll see both of the iterations in the POV as well. So if it is big orb, one tank and one healer will be targeted by a group share. So the way we did this is tanks and melees run to one side of the arena, healers and ranged run to the other side of the arena. And then we get our Shiva explosions here. And then we had it so that we always have like 3 and 4 for melees, 1 and 2 for our ranged, depending on where the AoEs start, because they always start north-south or they start east-west, for this pattern at least. In the first phase that is not always the case. Fountain of Fire. This is going to be one hell of a clusterfuck of a mechanic when you see it first, but it's actually really simple what needs to happen. So, there are going to be 4 puddles on each side of the arena, spawning on the outside, so 8 in total. These are going to be for your healers. What they do is they will tether to either the boss or the person that is standing inside of them, deal high damage if there is a person standing inside of them, and it will also give a damage up and a healing up buff. Now the damage up buff is not important, it's just important that if the boss gets the damage up, he's going to wipe you with his next raid wipe, but the healers are going to be soaking these because they get a healing up buff so they can heal themselves. This deals very high damage. I believe it is percentage based damage as well, so if a tank was to jump in these, they'll just get annihilated. You'll still survive it, but you still drop super low. But that's why we have our healers take them, because they can use the healing up that they get from it to just get back to full HP. The second part of this mechanic are these AoEs that you're seeing on our 2 melees right now. These are baited by the person that is closest to the boss, so we have melee ranged and then tank pick them up, because there's 3 sets of them. This will deal AoE damage on that player, it will spawn a Sunbird, and then that burst will also tether to them, which you again need to run away from to break the distance tether, but you'll see that in just a second. So, first set of AoEs go out, then that will spawn a bird, as you can see right here, you see this blue bird, so our melees are going to be running through the boss to break this tether, and then they dash to that player as well, giving them a fire resistance down. This is important because of course if you take these AoEs, they also give a fire resistance down, so you can't take an AoE and a bird in the face because that will kill you. Second set, third set, all the while our healers are rotating on the outside of the arena, grabbing their soak puddles. And that's the end of the mechanic. So I'm just going to rewind it again because there is a lot of information to process over here. So, first things first. Healers, north and south or east and west. That way they can soak all the puddles. When they soak a puddle, heal yourself or shield yourself to make sure that you don't die from the next one. The other 6 players. 2 players stand close to the boss. In our case it's going to be the melees, then it was going to be the ranged, then it is going to be the tanks to pick up these AoEs. Once you drop the AoE in front of the healer puddle, you run through the boss, stand slightly left or right depending on how you arrange it with your group, to make sure that you don't get hit by the other bird that's on the other side of the arena, and then that will resolve the mechanic. So, first AoEs get picked up, second AoEs get picked up, the birds dash in just a second, third AoEs get picked up, second set of birds dash, and then the third set run through the arena, and then those birds dash, all the while our healers are rotating around the arena, healing themselves. Now we have a Scorched Exaltation, raid wide AoE. So make sure that everybody is topped off for this, but they should be full HP because one heal will just put everyone to maximum HP. If you do a shield, for example, that will also be one gigantic shield. And then we have a second raid wide to finish off this mechanic. Following this, yet another tank buster. Because of course after each mechanic we need a tank buster, because we need something for the tanks to do as well. And then we go into the Firestorms of Asphodelos. Put up a lot of mitigation for this, because this hurts a lot. And this will do a few things. So first off, we have these fire tornadoes spawning on the edge of the arena. For now we can ignore these, don't need to worry about them yet. We then have the boss do Flames of Asphodelos. This will put 3 cleaves through the arena. You can just dodge it 3 to 1, fairly simple. Together with this is an experimental ash plume, and this is going to be the black/red one. Again, with the small orbs, players need to spread away. If it is one big orb, we have the tank and healer stacks. So for this, we already have ourselves pre-positioned. Our healers and the ranged are in front of the boss. Our tanks and the melees are at the back of the boss. In case it is stacks, but because it is a spread, after these cleaves go out, we're all going to be spreading around the boss. Then we get a second Flames of Asphodelos, so again those cleaves. But this time around, it's going to be a little bit more spicy, because there's a lot of other mechanics that come together with this. So after this one we get Storms of Asphodelos. This will do 3 things. First off, our healers and one of the ranged players need to bait the tornadoes on the outside of the arena. You can see one of my healers on the top right tornado, Our second healer is running to the top left tornado, and then we have our Bard on the bottom tornado that you can't see on the screen. Second mechanic is the boss will deal those tank busters again. So both of your tanks pick up your tethers, and we're also going to be positioning ourselves in front of one of the tornadoes to give our remaining 3 DPS players as much space as possible to bait 3 cleaves as well. These are all baited by distance, so your healers and ranged stand as close as possible to the tornado and bait it outwards, and then your 3 melees possible and bait your cleaves in between the tornadoes. There's going to be a lot of AoEs happening, but hopefully it will be kind of clear what needs to happen. So me and my co-tank stand in front of the tornadoes. We have 1 DPS here, 1 DPS here, and then a third one is standing at the front of the boss, and they are going to be getting those cleaves. I'll try to time it so that you can see what's happening. As you can see, 1, 2, and 3 cleaves, and then the tornadoes are doing cleaves as well on the person that was closest to them, which will be your 2 healers, and then also that third ranged. And that will resolve this mechanic. Lots of damage coming out over here, so you want to make sure that everybody is topped off. And I'll just rewind it real quick so that you can see it from the beginning again as well. It's very difficult to see because there's a lot of red during this phase, but that is kind of it. So you dodge the pizza slices, then healers and ranged get close to a tornado, 2 tanks pick up the tank busters, and then the 3 remaining DPS stand close to the boss to make sure that they bait the cleaves in between the tornadoes. And then it all resolves at the same time. Then Dark Blaze Twister. This is going to be tethering all 3 tornadoes, but the only one we have to pay attention to is the black one. So what we do here is we are going clockwise from our black tethered tornado, and then when we have Searing Breeze, the AoEs underneath our players, this will hit 4 times. We're going to be baiting that clockwise towards our Dark Twister. Another experimental ash plume, so stacks or spreads. Because it is tiny balls, we have spread. And then we're going to be knocked back to these other tornadoes because these are going to be doing donut AoEs. And then of course we spread around, and that finishes this mechanic. There's going to be one more raid wight, but I'll just rewind it so that you can see it from the beginning. So, Dark Blaze Twister. Identify where your dark tether is going towards, because that is the one that gives you the knockback. Start clockwise, count the 4 AoEs, so 1, 2, 3, and then 4. Look at the boss, if it is going to be spread or stack. It's going to be spread in our case. For the knockback, we made it so that our tanks and melees go to the left, healers and ranged to the right, so that if this was stack, we were already in our positions for that. And of course, if we're on left and right side of the arena, spreading out is also going to be easier. So because we're spread, go next to the tornado, we got knocked back. Donut AoEs from these tornadoes go out, and then we spread around for the ash plume mechanic. Everybody back to the middle for heals because of the raid wight that is coming afterwards. And this is the last big mechanic, I guess you could say, before the end of the fight. There is one more new mechanic that we haven't seen yet, which is the one that we're getting right now, Death's Toll. And then you have seen all of the mechanics that the fight has to offer. So, when Death's Toll casts, everybody is getting a debuff. Either you have 1 stack, 2 stack, or 4 stacks. Depending on these, you need to get hit a specific amount of times by the next mechanic. So, Fledgling Flight, just like the beginning of the second phase, everybody, or well, all of the healers and tanks, or all of the DPS get these plumes, but this time around we're going to be pointing them to the inside of the arena instead of the outside. And that is because we need to get hit by these cleaves, depending on the amount of times that you have a debuff. So, these plumes are now going to be doing their cleave through the arena. If you need to get hit once, if you have 1 debuff, you stand on a cardinal behind the plume. Just fuck up time at this point, just play it safe. It is possible to melee uptime this if you've placed everything correctly, but honestly, just play it safe, it's really not worth it. Then, if you have 2 stacks, you need to stand on an intercardinal. Again, use the little boxes that you can see on the arena, so the ABCD markers are going to be where those players need to stand. If you need 4 hits, then you just stand in the middle of the arena. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then everybody stack up in the middle for heals, because Life's Agonies is going to make it so that if you're not full HP, you're gonna die, And it also deals raid-wide damage, so everybody needs to be topped up regardless. If you have an Astrologian in your party, Microcosmos is quite literally an AoE benediction for this mechanic. So that's how that works. So I'll rewind it one more time so you can kind of see it. So look at where what debuff that you have, 1, 2, or 4. If you have 1, stand on a cardinal. If you have 2, stand on an intercardinal. If you have 4, stand in the middle of the arena. Everybody stack up for heals, so that when Life's Agonies casts, everybody is topped off. And then also some mitigation to make sure that you do not die to the raid-wide damage that it also deals. And then we've seen all of the mechanics. So another experimental glory plume. This time around it's going to be the baited one, so the big orb. And then either small orbs or group stacks. It's small orbs, so we need to spread. Run away. Everybody almost gets hit by this because the timing on this is kind of tight. We didn't figure out the timing because we only saw this mechanic twice. But yeah, that's kind of what happens there. And then of course we had the spread around the arena. Then we get the dive again. This time around it's the middle head that is casting, meaning we need to go to the edges of the arena and everybody needs to be spread out because we're getting individual AoEs. So boss is dashing through the middle, everybody is spread out for the individual AoEs, and then we're just gonna healer limit break to get everybody back up as well. Devouring Brand. This is again those line AoEs. Experimental Fire Plume again. Shiva or the big orb. It's the big orb, so we run away to a corner. Then once the lines touch the middle, they'll expand. Searing Breeze puts these AoEs underneath our feet. So just dodge them. Again, left or right Cinderwing. Dodge accordingly. And then we have 2 more raid-wide AoEs before we get our Enrage. So make sure that everybody's healed up if they got hit. And then also put up some mitigation if you have it to mitigate these 2 raid-wides. And that is pretty much going to do it for this fight. So if you have any more questions, then as always, feel free to leave them in the comments down below and I'll try to get back to you. At the moment, we're still progging the final fight. So of course, I can't always immediately respond back to you because we're still going to be spending some time raiding. But I'll try my best to respond to any questions that you might have. So that's going to do it for me. So I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank my patrons for their support and I'll see you in the next one.